I know that this won't be one of those episodes that is widely watched because this movie's pretty niche, but I really wanted to talk about Under the Skin. You see, I saw this movie when it came out, and I thought it was interesting, but depressing and confusing. I've seen it twice since then, and the last time was about a month ago, and I couldn't believe how impacted by it that I was. I loved it, and I really got wrapped up in everything that it was doing, and I thought that it deserved this episode to discuss some of the more like blatant questions that it brings up, because there's a lot. It's a very dark film though, so strap in and let's let the bad times roll. Question number one. What's going on in that opening shot? Look, this is a very abstract film that doesn't hand feed you anything, and it's telling you that from its very opening shot. From moment one, this movie tells you, yeah, you're gonna have to piece this all together. All you're given is a dark void and a single bright beam of light. Soon, some circular shapes appear while a woman's voice recites letters repeatedly. Those letters become sounds and combinations, and that shape begins to solidify into a somewhat more familiar form as it narrows down, and the sounds become full words. Eventually, we're shown an iris staring at us, and we're given the film's title. Now, the first time that you watch this film, it seems like a rather random and incomprehensible series of shots. Pretty lights and shapes up on the screen, and then that big eyeball, and with the strange sounds. Maybe it's some sort of tribute to 2001, A Space Odyssey. But in a way, it's way more than that. This very simple scene is actually giving you details about our main character that will become way more apparent later on in the film. Let's go over what we see. We get that big black screen, just complete darkness until that tiny pinprick of light starts to emerge from it. Well, we're going to get right into what this movie is and what it's about right now, since it's pretty essential to our answer here. But outside of the stylistic flourishes and the fractured way that it's told, this is a fairly simple story. Under the Skin is about an alien race that is coming to Earth and posing as beautiful women to infiltrate us. And we'll talk more about why in a little bit. But Scarlett Johansson is an alien from somewhere out there in space, and as we get to the finale, we discover that the part of her that looks like one of the characters from Eight-Legged Freaks is just a cover. It's like those fake masks from the Mission Impossible movies, but way creepier. Although those are fairly creepy. Like, how do they replicate bone structure? Whatever. When the alien is unveiled in those last moments, we see the true form. Its skin is jet black, with no distinguishable features, and no face, and yes, no eyes. The opening scene is the alien going through the process of being made to look human, getting its false cover. The full black frame that we get in the beginning isn't a dark void. We're actually looking at a close-up of the alien's face, but it's just so dark that we don't get any image. The light and the shape falling into place is the race's replication of a human eye, machinery made to look human and keep its cover. The sounds that we hear are the alien learning to talk in English, figuring out how to make human noises and words. The movie is secretly giving away its ending the second that title card flashes up. The entire opening bit with the darkness and those shapes that are being made into a human eye. We don't know what we're looking at, so the movie tells us. It's what's under the skin that we're about to see. Question number 2. Who is the woman in the beginning? Right after that opening scene, we're introduced to a couple of characters. One is a guy on a motorcycle who suddenly stops on the side of the road and reappears with a woman draped over his shoulder. He then goes to a nearby van, opens it up, and inside we see the woman is somewhat frozen, while a naked Scarlett strips her down and takes her outfit, while the woman sheds a single tear. So, again, what's going on here? Who is this woman? Much like I said earlier, the movie isn't really quick to offer up an easy explanation and allows us to interpret what's going on ourselves. With this scene, there's essentially two options. In either option, the motorcycle man is important, and we'll discuss him in a little bit. But the first option is that the woman is a human being and simply another victim of the aliens. It could be that she was just someone who was just there and a suitable size for their doppelganger to take her clothing. So, motorcycle guy sees her, does some sort of thing to incapacitate her, paralyzing her, and then takes her to wherever Scarlet is. She's seemingly aware of what's going on and therefore the tear, and is literally just killed afterwards. But that's not the option that I think is the way to go. I think that the movie is strongly hinting that this woman is also an alien, and that she's the Scarlet alien's predecessor. There's several reasons to think this. One is the clothing themselves. The articles are the same size as Scarlet. She's able to put them on with ease, and that includes a bra. This would appear to indicate that when they make a female infiltrator, they have one basic body type, a model that they use, and it's always the same size. When they switch one out from one to the other, it's simply a matter of changing the clothes, and the new one is good to go. The tear seems to give an indication of why they need to do the changeover as well. As we'll see a little later on, these infiltrator models are subject to feeling compassion, and learning about humanity makes them more like us. It would appear as if this earlier version was rebelling against her mission and was choosing to abandon it, which we'll see seems to be a trend. This causes the motorcycle guy to hunt her down and incapacitate her, allowing the new version to take over. Now, besides the clothing, I think that the clue to this being the case for me is the presence of the van. It's possible that this was just a car that was just there or belonged to the woman, and the motorcycle man just took it. But the Scarlet alien will go on to use it throughout the rest of the film. When he shows up with the woman on his shoulder, he walks right up to the van and throws open the back door. To me, this indicates a familiarity with it. He knew that it would be unoccupied, and he knew that it would be unlocked. We see him riding up right at that time, so we know that it's not that he was staking it out and saw that this would be the case. So I think that this is the clue that the van was the property of the earlier alien woman, and she would use it in the same way that her successor will. Motorcycle Man recognized her van, knew where she would be because of it, and then tossed her in the back of it when he found her. Question number 3. What's the deal with the ant? In that very same scene, there's a rather dramatic moment in which the Scarlet alien notices something on the stomach of the incapacitated woman. She leans down and picks it up, and we see that it's a tiny ant crawling on the alien's finger. It's just a quick, momentary shot, like a fleeting instance in the scope of this film. So what's it doing here? Well, there's actually a couple of layers to this tiny series of events. The first is the idea that this is an alien life form that has just taken on human form just before this. We literally saw them putting together her human form in that opening segment, and this shot is apparently still on the alien ship, or whatever it is. This interaction with the ant is literally her first interaction with any sort of alien entity or organic creature. Keep in mind that I've established that I think that the woman here is simply another alien with fake skin, so touching this ant is the first encounter with anything outside of her species that this being is experiencing. This tiny, living thing. And one of the key moments is that she seems interested in it and doesn't immediately kill it. There's a tiny compassion here, a curiosity, and I think that that's an indication of how things will turn out later for her. But there's another aspect in this, in that we see what the creature will look like when the skin comes off. And I've already talked about that briefly, but I think that there's a tiny, scant instance of recognition here. I think it sees itself in this tiny form, a similarity. Their actual forms are not that entirely far off from what this ant looks like, and on a metaphoric aspect, acts like. Ants are essentially drones with no self-identity and only tasks at hand. They don't really show any sort of emotion or empathy. They're also pretty terrible at politics. Because, have you ever heard of an insect politician? I hear that one time a fly tried and he got his head blown off for it. So it's probably best to, I don't know, just leave that all be. Or be in that case. And hey, that's a spelling joke, so I hope it comes off okay in the audio part of this. But from what we can tell, this alien race is very similar to that. They act without remorse or emotion and are just following a greater set of orders, like drones. They're not far off from ants, and the movie is telling you that in a way. There's a tiny connection between these two beings, if only for two shots. Question number 4. Who is the motorcycle man? Hey, speaking of that mysterious man on the cycle, who exactly is he? Because I will tell you one thing. He's definitely not the cool rider. But he's also no ordinary boy, because no ordinary boy is going to do. But this is probably the easiest answer on here, and likely one of the ones that can be determined simply from the things that the film is showing you. But this guy is basically the Scarlet Alien's boss, or if not exactly that, her minder. It's his job to make sure that she's on track with her mission and has what she needs. He's seen cleaning up after her several times, going back to the scenes of her abductions to pick things up, and later on, likely kills a man that the alien sets free. But it's pretty obvious that there's some sort of hierarchy here, and the female creature is under the care of the motorcycle man, but not in a benign way. It's his job to keep her in line, and he appears to be aggressive in doing so. Based on what we see here, I think it's clear that this is not the first time they've been doing this. There's multiple hints of that, with the woman in the beginning being one clue. But the appearance of multiple motorcycle men near the ending shows that there's probably more than one of the female hunters out there as well. And it would appear that it's a recurring thing for them to break their mission to go off on their own. Judging that 2 in a row had some sort of instance where they went off book and had to be hunted down, it seems like the presence of the minders is necessary. There's a really interesting dynamic to all of that, considering the insinuation is that 2 of these type of infiltrators in a row gained empathy and sympathy towards humans through their interactions, whereas the Cycle Dude, who seemingly also interacts with people, but possibly not as much, however seems to be there for longer, do not. To me, that indicates that there's different classes to the aliens, and we're back in that insect analogy with workers and drones and such. Take a look at the scene where it seems like he's starting to doubt her and silently stares her down, like an inspection or possible inquisition, and it's subtle because there's a general lack of emotion, but he's the aggressor in this scene, whereas the female alien looks slightly nervous and scared. This comes right after her last victim couldn't stop talking about her eyes and how special that they were, and he's looking directly into them, looking to see what that guy saw. Clearly, that means that her interactions are also monitored, and that triggered some sort of mandatory inspection. But yeah, whereas it's hard to feel like our main alien is a good guy in any way, given what she's doing, but it's also clear that she's not exactly evil or acting in malice, whereas the Cycle guy is more the villain, acting with no remorse, willing to take out his own kind for getting out of line, like a Walmart store manager. Question number 5. What happened to the baby? So there's a scene in this movie that is just the most nerve-wracking thing that I've ever seen. It starts off simple enough with a family on a beach having a nice, relaxing picnic. There's also a guy in a wetsuit exploring the surf, and the alien has seemingly chosen him as someone that she can entice back to her lair. Unfortunately, the family's dog has went into the water and is caught in the current, so the mother has gone in to try to pull him out. However, the tide's too strong and ends up taking her out as well, causing the father to spring into action to get them, with the young man pitching in as well. Unable to combat the crashing waves, the woman is soon lost, although the wetsuit guy is able to pull the father back. The crazed dad runs back into the surf to try to save his wife, while the younger man passes out from exhaustion. The alien then knocks him out and takes him away, while the father is not seen again, seemingly also lost to the sea. As the young man is dragged away, we see the family's infant child on the shore, crying for his parents. It's a gut punch of a scene, only made more painful when we see the motorcycle man go back to the shore to erase any evidence that the wetsuit man was ever there, passing up the baby and leaving it there as night falls. As he walks away, it looks like the tide is coming in even further, nearer to the child. So, what happens here? Well, I have some bad news for you because let's face it, there's not much happy happening in this movie. So, don't expect it here. Later on, there's a news report that lets us know that the father's body is washed up on the shore and had been in the water for quite some time. So, even though we don't see the outcome for the dad, we know that he died from drowning. The report also states that his wife and child are also missing, which indicates that they didn't find the kid. Now, several things are possible here, and they don't necessarily have to all be bleak. One of my first instincts would be to think that the motorcycle man killed the child as a part of the cleaning process, since he also took out the man that the alien lets go later on. But if he were going to do that, I think it would have been in the instance that we witness. Instead, he simply pulls away Wetsuit Guy's towel and leaves the child behind as he realized that the infant would not be able to say anything about the incident and was not a threat. But the fact that the kid isn't found isn't necessarily terrible news. After all, the chances of the father's body washing up in the same place as we last saw him aren't that great. So it's not like they found the body on that same beach and the baby wasn't there. The kid could have been found by someone else and they just hadn't connected the two cases yet. The baby could still be there and was found later as it used its baby survival skills to grab some incoming fish and then... who am I kidding? This movie's as dark as it gets. The kid's toast. Question number 6. What happens to the men that she lures in? So there's been talk so far here about what the alien female is doing in luring men into her lair, but I haven't yet discussed what actually happens to them there. And let me tell you, it's pretty disturbing. First, she entices them off the streets. And for real, what enticing does she have to do? I mean, look at her. And here's a side note. A couple of these shots are done guerrilla style, with ScarJo riding up on actual strangers on the streets of Scotland and filming with a hidden camera. They were told that they were filmed afterwards, though, and their permission was given to include them into the movie, and several encounters with the guys that she picks up were with non-actors that were recruited from the streets. But then, after she gets them in her van, she takes them back to where her ship or base or whatever is, and they enter a black void. She walks away from them, and they follow her, not noticing that they are sinking into the blackness. And it's been talked about that, and people are like, how do they not notice that this is happening to them and freak out? And my guys, Scarlett Johansson, I repeat, Scarlett Johansson is in front of them undressing. Do you really think that they would notice anything else at that point? But then they end up in this murky black liquid suspended under like water and seemingly unable to move very much outside of basic swimming motions. But here's where it gets gross, because one guy who is trapped under there encounters one of the earlier gents, the wetsuit guy, and reaches out to him. But his skin is all worn out and loose. And then shortly after, he implodes into an empty skin bag. It then floats down, and there's this tunnel of sludge that pours into a red light, where it turns into a laser Floyd show, and then a bright beam of light. And yeah, what the hell? Based on what we can see here, floating in the liquid is essentially an extraction process. That fluid is draining something from the human bodies, leaving behind only the empty husk. It seems like that part they have no use for. They only want us for what we have under the skin. See? Movies just layering on top of layers for us. So after they pull out whatever they're after, it looks like this lava goop and is poured out somewhere, and I guess makes light. So let's look deeper. Part of this is going to come from the book that this movie is based on, even though the film is quite different. The book is far more a damnation of capitalism and corporations essentially destroying everything. The aliens there are interested in farming us. Those organs that are extracted from the people in the fluid are being processed to turn into food. We're supposed to think that she's unfeeling and uncaring because she pays no mind to the welfare of the humans that she's harvesting. But the point is carried over to human beings and the food that we eat, not caring about the lives of the animals and the livestock. And that's how these aliens view us, as livestock. But the film takes a different tack and doesn't really explore that part of things, instead dealing with what humanity means and how emotion and empathy shape us. This film gives us the equivalent of James Cromwell going to work on the film Babe and realizing, holy crap, I can't eat these guys anymore and I'm becoming a vegan. And again, I'm going to pull that title metaphor back here because we're finding out what's under that alien's guise, under her skin. Finding out that the humans are meat to be processed with what's under their skin, but also that human spirit and emotional core that makes us who we are under the skin. Question number 7. What happens with the man with the roses? There's quite a few moments in this film that seem like random events, just stuff that happens. After all, a portion of it is the alien cruising around town and having random interactions with men that she meets. But then, there's one moment that stands out from that and seems a little bit more deliberate. She's sitting in traffic, and a man walks up to her window with a rose. He says that it was bought for her from a man in another car, and she takes it. But then she notices that there's blood on the flowers. As she touches it, she looks over and sees the man who brought them to her, and he's bandaging a wound on his hand, working through the pain. Again, this is very specific to happen and not without meaning. This is the turning point for the alien. Up until this point, she's been focused on her mission and has been treating humans like cattle, but also talking to them and slowly seeing that they're more than just prey. And then this scene happens. It's a casual moment with her having a meeting with someone that she has no intentions with, and what she experiences is a very human moment. The man gives her the flower, and he's bleeding but continuing on with his work in a state of distress. At this point, her knowledge of humans doesn't seem to be too great. This scene is her realizing that they're more than just something to feed on. This is her first interaction with blood, something we find out later that she does not have. Seeing this as a new experience for her and her first look at what humans have, again, under the skin, this is the turning point for her character, and from this point on, we see her reaction to things start to change. She's learning empathy and understanding what makes humanity. It's not accidental that the scene directly after this is her listening to the news report about the drowned family, and she listens to it, hearing the aftermath of her own actions. And even though it's not expressly stated, it's clear that this is where she starts to doubt her mission. In the scope of the film, it's a tiny moment, just a minor scene, but it's this point that changes the character's trajectory. Question number 8. Who's Laura? In the film, no name for the alien is ever spoken. There's a point where someone asks her name and she doesn't respond and changes the subject. In fact, in the credits, none of the characters are given names. Usually, you'll see the actor's name and then right afterwards, the character that they played in the film. But here, it's just a list of the names. On IMDb, her name is given as the female, and the motorcycle guy is credited as the bad man. But if you look up discussions of this film online and read people talking about it or read film reviews, they'll often refer to the alien as Lara. So, where does this name come from? Well, it's not the book, since the female's name there is Isserly. So did fans just give her a name and then run with it? Well, it turns out that her name actually is Lara, and at one point was credited as such. It's unclear if the ending credits that were attached to the film festival versions of the film had her like that, but on a couple of reviews for the movie before it was released, and from reviewers that had seen it at festivals, they all referred to her as Lara. One of them stated that her character's name is given as Lara in the credits, although it doesn't say if they're talking about the credits on the film or press packs that were given out. The name did show up in one other place, though, confirming it to be that actual character title, and that was on the DVD on a bonus featurette entitled Editing. So, even though the name is never given, it seems like that was an intention at one point. Question number 9. What happens at the end? I think I mentioned a few times now that this movie it's pretty depressing, and the ending of this one is no exception. As I've said earlier, as the film goes on, the Scarlet Alien, or I guess I can call her Lara. Lara starts to empathize more with humans and with life. She tries to explore what a life is like and attempts to experience things like food and sex, although her encounters with those things are awkward and unfortunate. However, as she abandons her mission, now sought after by several motorcycle men, she ends up in a forest, taking a makeshift refuge. A large logger comes across her and attempts to assault her, and she fights back, but her skin suit is torn, revealing the alien under the skin. She holds it for a moment as her face now peers up at her and blinks. Horrified at what he's seeing, the logger goes back to his truck, retrieves a gas can, and then burns her alive. Lara stumbles through the woods on fire before succumbing to the flames, with the ashes going up into the sky. One thing to address is the blinking eyes of the Scarlet Face looking back at her and what that means. And this is pretty easy since we know that her facial features were fake, and we saw them building them in the beginning. She didn't actually use those eyes to see. And as we see when the mask is removed, she doesn't have eyes like we know them. The operations of that face were not controlled by her necessarily and were a program, a simulation of humanity. And she's now shed that, but it's still in operation, still blinking and moving. On a metaphoric level, the scene represents her going from a predator to prey, but also joining humanity in a way. She has been slowly growing accustomed to a female form, but since she was following her mission, held the upper hand. Here, she's alone, and is now subject to the concerns that a human woman also would, and does not survive it. It's a tragic ending, although I love that the film is able to make me feel such empathy for a character that is also shown to be acting completely monstrous. Question number 10. What are the differences between the film and the movie? Well, let me tell you, plenty. First off, the film was directed by Jonathan Glazer, and he also co-wrote it with William Campbell. And it was based on a book with the same name by Michael Faber from 2000. It's wild because the original script for the film was a more direct adaptation, designed for a bigger budget and had a larger amount of special effects necessary. But then there were several more revisions, and at one point wasn't about a single woman alien, and instead had a husband and wife pair of farmers that were aliens in disguise, and one was cast as Brad Pitt, but then went back to focusing on the female character and removed every scene that didn't involve her and got rid of all the big effect set pieces. Unlike the film's bare bones approach, the book is way more descriptive about what's going on. It gives the alien's name as Isserly and explains that she's an alien and that her mission is to harvest human meat to take back to her homeworld, where it's a delicacy. To become more human, she had to have surgeries that were described as very painful and arduous, and she remains in pain throughout the story. Much like the film, she starts to become more intrigued by humans and humanity, but There's a ton more internal dialogue going on here, and all of the instances are specifically spelled out. Essentially, what it comes down to is that if you're intrigued by the film and want a very explicit telling of what is happening with everything, then the book will fill that in for you. There's also a side character here that's not present in the film named Amlis Vess, and he's the son of the alien that set Italy up on her mission, her boss. He becomes the character that she confides in there, and he proves to be sympathetic towards humans as well, and actually goes back home to try to plead for them to change their tactics. There's also a scene in the book that's similar to what happens in the movie where one of the men that she picks up tries to assault her and she kills him. This happens earlier in the book than it does in the movie and is handled very different in that it's one of the men that she's selected for harvesting instead of a random encounter. The biggest difference, though, is the ending. I've described what happens in the film version, but what happens on the page is a whole other thing. In the book, after Vess has left, she continues on her hunt for men, but is having massive doubts. She quits the job and abandons her post and picks up a hitchhiker along the way, but is then in a car crash. The hitchhiker is thrown from the vehicle and survives, but Italy is severely mangled. Realizing that the discovery of her body would reveal her to be an alien, she takes the Predator route and activates a self-destruct system that will destroy her and all evidence of the crash and her presence. She ponders the fact that her atoms will become a part of the beauty on Earth and is at peace with it. So yeah, still kind of a dark ending, but about 14% more cheerful than the movie, which has been described as making the ending of The Mist look like an episode of Bosom Buddies. So there you have it, 10 answers to questions brought up by the film Under the Skin. And yeah, guys, I love this movie. I understand that there's quite a few people that don't. I think that this is one of those movies that you get or you don't. And when I say that you don't get it, I don't mean you don't understand it and that's why you don't like it. But certain movies click with people in certain ways, and sometimes people just don't click with a certain movie. They don't get it. Like you understand it, but it just doesn't connect with you. And this is a movie that I feel like you have to connect with to enjoy on the level that I did. So if you don't, I totally understand it. This is a movie that people will click with or they won't. Let me know if you enjoy this. Let me know if you have other questions of the film. Let me know that down below in the comments. I want to hear that. Let me know if you enjoyed this video. You can hit that like button by doing that. You can also subscribe to the channel if you enjoy what you see, and go to my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines like these guys do. I appreciate them, and I appreciate you for watching, and we'll see you very shortly for another great video. Thanks a lot, guys, and bye-bye.